Hello, everybody. Sorry for the wait. We had a problem. I'm just letting people in. Many apologies. We're using a different Zoom account tonight. All right. So, just checking to see who we have here of commissioners. Carrie, are you in? Our land use clerk. Mary, I see you.
Yes, I'm here.
I need to make Carrie Marshall.
I think I am already a co-host.
Are you? Will you check that?
Yes, I think
I don't even see you, Carrie. What's your name here?
I think I'm still logged into the same one. I'll have to log back out to log into my personal one.
What account are you logged into?
The same one as you, which is why there's two Mariana.
Okay, so yeah, hang on. All right. And is Penny here? No. Okay. A lot of confusion. I'm sorry. We're just gonna wait for Carrie, who is our land use clerk, to sign back in, and then we'll call the meeting. And I'm sorry, very sorry for the delays. Who do we have from the commission? I see Beth and Mary. Who else is here?
I'm here now.
And do we have Scott?
I don't see Scott.
Oh. Well, I know that Robin is away.
I see Beth, but I don't see Scott.
I don't recall that Scott was going to be away. But I guess we have a quorum with 3. Okay, Carrie, are you there now? Yes, she is.
Yes, I am.
I'm gonna make you co-host, Carrie, so give me a sec. All right. All right. So we are going to call the meeting for 7:08. And again, many apologies for the delays. We may have to try to be time efficient. I'm going to suggest, because we're starting late, that we review the minutes later in the evening. Is that okay with the commission?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Great. To review tonight, we're going to have a brief discussion with Willa Jarnagan about her RDA updates. Is Willa here?
Yes.
Hi, Willa. Welcome. Would you be okay with our starting a little early with your discussion?
Sure.
Okay, that'd be great. And then we'll get on with other things. So, and I just want to ask everybody else who's here at the meeting, if you are not speaking or recognized, please put yourself on mute so we don't have any background noise, because we have a lot of people. And if possible, if your name is not showing up on Zoom, and if you wouldn't mind putting your name on, that would make it a lot easier for our land use clerk taking minutes, because she has to record everybody who came to the meeting. If you would please do that. Okay, so this is a follow-up to Willa Jarnagan's RDA, which was reviewed back in November for her driveway repaving. And part of what we asked was for Willa to come back and show us a plan of what she wanted to do with a rain garden. Commissioners, have you had a chance to look at the photograph she sent?
Yep.
Do you want?
Yes, I did.
Do you want me to screen share it? Would that be helpful?
Sure.
Okay, well, I got things queued up, hopefully, to screen share. We'll see if that actually works. I also have the original site plan queued up, so we'll see if I can screen share a JPEG. I'm not sure. We'll look. Yes. Okay, can everybody see it?
Yep.
Willa, do you want to just tell us what you're thinking about?
Sure. So I did quite a bit of reading about plants, more than you'd probably guess to look at this, but I needed to find plants that will do well in shade, sandy soil, that they probably have to be perennials because they'll be under a snowbank all winter, and something kind of just practical and hardy because I'm not a gardener. So I figured that keeping it simple was my best chance for success here. So I want to, I'd like to plant ferns that are in the area inside the riprap, either transplanted from elsewhere in the yard or planted new. I understand that there's one particular kind of fern you shouldn't transplant, so I wanted to ask you which one that is so I make sure I don't do that. And then over to the side where the yellow stars are, I want to plant black-eyed Susans because they are native and they are pollinator friendly. And again, they seem pretty simple, you know, something I can get easily. And I don't know how many I'll plant there. The 2 stars is really just to indicate the area.
Okay. Beth, can you respond about the ferns or Janice?
I think the ferns are a good plan for there. You'd want to, not plant wetland ferns there because it sounds like you have sandy soil. It looks like it's sandy soil there. So, if you, what's in your yard is probably the best choice because it's the same soils. I don't know what types of ferns you have, but
Okay,
transplanting from your yard is a good idea.
okay,
And I like the black-eyed Susans too.
okay.
You might want to ask around. There's a lot of people who have extra black-eyed Susans in the spring.
Oh, okay, good idea.
Or put up a post on Nextdoor Shutesbury. There are a lot of gardeners who are willing to donate stuff.
Okay, great,
I mean, rather than just throw things away.
sure.
Sometimes we have an abundance. Like the black-eyed Susans can be pretty hardy, so they spread like crazy sometimes if they like where they are. Janice, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of ferns, I don't think there's a bad fern, although perhaps people would say that hay scented gets out of control. Otherwise, I don't know what it would be, but most likely, depending on how sunny or shady that spot is, just find a similar site on site in her property and, take them from there to be most likely to succeed.
Okay, all right.
Okay. All right. Well, any other questions?
Not at this end.
Okay. Well, I'll make a motion that we approve this planting plan. Do I have a second?
Mary, second.
Mary seconds. Okay. David,
Aye.
Wilson,
Aye.
and DeFont, aye. Okay. Well, Willa, good luck. And thank you for coming back to us.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right. Well, let's move on. Let me stop the screen share. All right. It is 7:15. We were going to be having a discussion with TRC in advance of the public hearing, and maybe this is a good time to do it. And is Emily Stockman here? Emily is not here yet. Okay, I think she's planning on coming tonight. But I wonder if she's having trouble logging in. Okay.
Yeah, I still don't see Emily or Scott.
Well, I don't, Mary, would you be willing to go mute and call Scott and see if he's coming? Sometimes people forget.
Yeah, do you got a number?
Yeah, if everybody on the phone, on the Zoom call pretends that they didn't hear it. I don't know if you want number.
Mary, you can privately message Mary. You can send a chat message that only goes to her.
That I think chat is it isn't disabled.
It should be.
It should be, but we're not using a regular thing. So let me try to see. Maybe Scott's, oh, you know what? I kind of feel like Scott might have said he was out of town. I think he said he was going to be out of town, so we're not going to wait. Maybe we can just start this discussion, and just so everybody knows, I just want to acknowledge Donna is here, Donna McNichol, our town council. Hi, Donna. You're muted, but welcome.
Good evening.
We're just going to have a brief conversation before we started the public hearing with TRC about the Pratt Corner West ANRAD's submission. I had an email with Maria about this earlier today, just following up on a couple of things. One that, and I wanted to review this with the commission, that, you know, I would recommend that we make arrangements to engage Emily, to be involved as a third-party reviewer, even though this is a redo of the hearing, simply because we have two commissioners who didn't attend any of the previous commission meetings in which Emily participated, and they may want to discuss the project with our third-party reviewer. So that was one issue. And then the second issue is around a butter notification and just making sure we're all clear about what the requirement is, since it's been pointed out to us that the bylaw requirement for a butter notification requires a certified mail with return receipt, while the Wetlands Protection Act allows for certificates of mailing that do not have return receipts. The other requirement under the bylaw is that plans be sent to the butters, and that is a fairly unwieldy thing, given how many pages these plans are and how big they are. I think the commission needs to consider whether we believe the spirit of this requirement would be met by having the plans on the town website and having the abutter notices explain to abutters how they can access the plans either on the website or by contacting town hall. Does that capture it, Donna?
Yeah, I think that obviously the point of notification and getting the plans to people is so that they can review them and be prepared for the hearing. Sending out these plans is really unwieldy, and particularly in big projects where there's numerous abutters. You need to change your regulations. I mean, let's be clear, you should be doing it pursuant to the regulations. But if in fact all the abutters get notice and you have evidence of that notice, and in fact they have access to them on the website, or we make it so that if they can't access the website for some reason, we can get them plans, then I think that you've served the function of the notice of hearing and getting them the information they need. But I want the regulations changed because
Yes, we absolutely need to update that.
Yeah.
There is a provision in the bylaw which allows us to waive something if we feel that the interests of the bylaw are being met by an alternative means. So I don't know if that can be applicable in this situation if we feel like the interests of public access is being met through these alternative means. Is that possible for us to use that language, Donna?
Yeah, I think you certainly can, that you're waiving the requirement for notice and hearing so long as fair notice and information is able to be received.
Okay.
And making sure people can call town hall, and if they really want them mailed, you know.
Yeah.
That
So,
kind of.
so it seems like we should probably make a motion here, so that's an official decision that we're making. Maria, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, if it's all right, I also wanted to point out that in addition to digital documents on the website, that the notice to abutters does have TRC's contact information, that we have historically provided hard copies to anyone that reaches out and asks for one.
Great.
And
Thank you.
that depending on how everyone feels about what's being discussed, that potentially a middle ground for the notices for this, instead of including an entire map set, we could include just the cover page that shows the whole site, as it does show where the resources are. It just doesn't have quite as many details as the entire plan set does.
Well, I think that would be I think that would be
That would be great.
appreciated by people. I think that sounds like a reasonable solution to me. So would somebody like to make a motion regarding I guess maybe I should do it since I'm thinking about it here. I'm going to move that the commission accept the proposal for certified mailing with return receipt, including a cover sheet of the map to be sufficiently meeting the interests of public notification for the bylaw. Do I have a second?
Do you want to add in that those plans will be posted on the website?
Well, they already are on the website, and that is always been our practice as soon as we get them. So,
And this is Mary, and I'll second.
okay, David,
Aye.
DeFont, Wilson.
Aye.
Okay, so moved. And Emily's not here, is she? So I had a conversation with Emily today.
I am here.
Oh, great. Hi, Emily. Emily, I did talk with Emily about this issue about having a third-party review agreement for the Pratt Corner West, and you were going to double check to see when we make that decision. Can we make the decision now, or do we have to wait until we open the public hearing?
So I did review some of the agendas from past peer reviews, and it appears that as long as the commission is taking the vote during the public meeting process, that they can vote to require a peer review, and then upon receipt of the proposal, they can vote to approve the proposal.
Great. All right, so we have some discussion about that. So the idea here would be that, and just so the public understands, the ANRAD for Pratt Corner West public hearing closed last January, and an order of resource area delineation was issued. However, over the summer, we realized that the commissioners who voted on that ORAD did not meet the quorum requirements because two of us were new to the commission and had not attended all of the public hearings. So in agreement with us, TRC withdrew that ANRAD and is resubmitting it now so that it can all be reviewed and approved by a qualifying majority of commissioners. So the maps have already been reviewed multiple times and have gone through a third-party review process with Emily, but we still have to go through a public hearing. And the thinking was to include Emily, one, to be available to the commissioners to discuss this project at the next public hearing, and then also to draft the ORAD for us, as she is doing for the Montague Carver project.
I think Penny has a question.
Yeah, Penny. I can't see people's, maybe I should not be on the speaker view.
Sorry, my question was about the previous topic. Are you talking, when you talked about the issue of how plans are provided and certificate of mailing, are you talking about drafting changes to the bylaw, or are you talking about doing a one-time change here?
Well, I have to look at whether we can, I think that's a discussion, Emily, Penny, we could have about whether we're going to have to change the bylaw or whether we can do it through regulations.
Yeah. Well, it would be certainly a good time to talk about getting the certificate of mailing issue in compliance with how the state does it now, just for ease of people who are applying.
that's that's what we're discussing. That's the point.
Okay, good.
But
Okay.
because we haven't resolved it, and there have been some concerns raised by residents that they were abutters and didn't get notifications. We are out of an abundance of caution, asking for these return mail receipts for this next ANRAD. We're not asking this for Montague Carver because, we're already far enough along in the process and we accepted the application as being complete. So, well, we didn't accept it as being complete. We didn't bring it up as an issue when the notifications were being sent out.
I see. Okay, thanks for clarifying.
I want to correct myself about that. Somebody put in the chat that they thought there were people in the waiting room, but I am not seeing anybody in the waiting room. And I would like to ask that people not use the chat because I am not, no one is monitoring it. And ordinarily the chat functions are disconnected for the purposes of these Zoom meetings for the town. So please don't use the chat. If you need to ask a question, raise your hand. So we are going, so I guess we've resolved these issues. I guess we need to take a vote on Maria as a third-party reviewer. So I'd like to move that the commission, I guess what would we request of, how do we word this? That we request of the applicant an agreement for a third-party review for Pratt Corner West. Is that the process here?
Yeah, I think so.
Is that right, Emily?
Yeah, so typically at this stage, you would vote to have a peer review and
Okay.
to receive proposals. And then once the proposal is received, it can be reviewed by both the commission and the applicant. And then vote at the subsequent meeting to approve the proposal.
Well, I move that we approve having a third-party reviewer, Emily Stockman is our third-party reviewer for the new submission of the ANRAD for Pratt Corner West. Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, David,
Aye.
Stefan, I, and Wilson.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we've got a couple of minutes. And when we open the public hearing, I'm going to make a few comments about public comment. And we're going to have some discussion amongst the consultants and the commissioners. And then we will allow a period for public comment. So, and I'm going to explain a little bit how that's going to all work in a few minutes. We can't open the public hearing for one more minute. So we have to just sit tight. Just have a mindful moment. Okay, it is set, my watch is saying 7:30, so I am going to open the continued public hearing for ZD 37 Montague Carver, ANRAD DP file 286-0285. So I want to welcome everybody here, and we're very pleased and happy to have such a big turnout and so much interest in wetlands and in the Conservation Commission's mission. Before we get into the hearing, I just want to make a few comments about public engagement tonight. And again, I want to welcome you and encourage your participation. Your voice is important to us. We expect this hearing to be about 1 hour long. And I do want to explain that it will be continued to another date at the request of the applicants. There are some additional investigations that the applicants are doing, and they have to get materials back to us to review. So no decisions are going to be made tonight. The purpose of the hearing is to help gather information for our decision-making process. Toward that end, it's important that we be able to ask questions to the applicant and the consultants, and when necessary and important, we will also be asking questions or interacting with the public if they have information that is helpful to us to share. We have reviewed and approved a process, a policy for public participation. So I just want to go over the kind of the ground rules, because we want to have an orderly and productive meeting. We will not be allowing any discussion of the ANRAD outside of the public hearing. So when we finally vote to remove ourselves from the public hearing tonight, to continue it to another date, there'll be the end of the discussion about the ANRAD. We're going to spend about 15 minutes to 30 minutes discussing some issues with the applicant and our peer reviewer and our other consultants. This is not a period when public comments will be entertained, so I ask everyone's patience, and if you have questions, please save them for the comment period. I am budgeting about half an hour tonight for public comments, and then after that, we have to move on to other agenda items for the evening. So just some things to think about. Please make your comments respectful. Please stay muted until you're called upon. Use your raise hand function to make a comment, and you'll be called upon in order as best we can. If you're on a phone and you can't raise your hand, you can just interrupt, unmute, and just shout out that you want to say something, and we'll get to you. When you are called upon, please say your name and your address clearly for the record. Please try to keep your comments brief. We are allowing 2 minutes per person for public comment, and we are going to be keeping time, and we will give you a 30-second warning after 90 seconds. Penny Jakes is going to say time, just so you can wrap up. And if you're unable to wrap up, we'll have to move on because we have other things to talk about, and we want to make room for other people to have comments as well. We will not entertain second comments from the same person unless there's no one else with their hand raised. There are two residents, Ken Holt and Carlos. Please mute yourself. Carrie, can you mute whoever is not? Okay, thank you. Ken Holt and Carlos Fontes have asked for a longer period of time to make a brief presentation of 5 minutes each, and we're allowing this because they are representing a larger group of people they're speaking on behalf of. If you are one of those abutters, I would just ask that you refrain from making comments unless you have something to offer or to comment on that Carlos and Ken have not shared, just so that we're not having a lot of redundant comments. We've received a large number of emails from the public, and I just want to assure you that all of those emails have been forwarded to the commission and will be added to the official file for the ANRAD. I've also shared a number of them with the applicant and with Emily Stockman, our third-party reviewer. So on behalf of the commission, I just want to assure you that we are committed to doing a thoughtful, careful, and appropriate review of any project. We care about the environment, about wetlands, about wildlife habitat and water quality and quantity, and we are committed to enforcing both the Wetland Protection Act and the bylaw. So just to summarize quickly, and then we're going to finally get into things. I just want to explain for folks who are here for the first time, kind of where we are in this process. So an ANRAD stands for Abbreviated Notice of Resource Area Delineation. It's a process that allows a landowner to determine the precise boundaries of wetlands and buffer zones that are regulated under the Wetlands Protection Act and the local bylaw, Wetlands Protection Bylaw. The project site is mapped, and then the boundaries are verified by an independent third-party reviewer who works for the commission at the applicant's expense. The delineation is a field-based investigation process based upon wetland science and regulations that focus on wetland plant communities, hydric soils, and surface water hydrology to delineate where wetland habitats exist. The role of the commission here is to properly interpret the laws and the regulations and consider scientific evidence about wetlands, habitats, and hydrology. Wherein the applicant has met the burden of proof of demonstrating that the preponderance of the credible evidence from competent sources confirm a wetland boundary, the commission is statutorily required to approve that boundary. A preponderance of evidence is a lower standard than beyond a reasonable doubt. And I wanted to make that clear to people. It means essentially that there is greater than a 50% probability that the delineation is correct. At the conclusion of the process, a map and field flagging are approved for a 3-year period. The ANRAD is not a permit to go forward with a project. At this point, no project has been submitted to the Conservation Commission, so we have no impacts that we are directly evaluating. Future construction or development in resource areas or buffer zones require a notice of intent application at a later date. Right now, we're reviewing maps and feedback from our third-party reviewer. TRC plans to do additional field investigations this spring, which will need to be reviewed by our third-party reviewer before any final decisions can be made. So we're gathering information, including from the public, and we are not making any final decisions tonight. Thank you. Okay. Why don't we start with hearing from Maria and getting an update for maybe 5 minutes about where we're at with what your efforts are.
Okay, so Maria Furstenberg from TRC, we're representing the applicant in this case. At one of the previous meetings that we attended, the commission, based on the peer review, one of the peer reviewers' comments about this site, requested that we try to get permission to delineate a portion of wetlands that extend outside of the site boundaries so that we can appropriately set the 100-foot buffer zone. And that area involves 2 parcels that don't belong to the applicant. And we received permission back from one of those landowners to go on their land and delineate that area. We did go and visit the site a couple weeks ago when it was really warm, but it was still frozen, so we could not access soils, which are really important for evaluating where the wetland is, particularly at this site. That has been a deciding factor in terms of where the line is historically. So we are currently just waiting for it to thaw out so that we can access everything we need to access to do this correctly. We anticipate that that should happen in the beginning of April, that we should have appropriate conditions to be able to do that. That's all I have.
I had a couple questions, Maria, from the feedback we got from the last third-party review from Emily. And one of the questions I had was, there are some wetland boundaries that had not been delineated that Emily called attention to, that she said she was not advising us to approve because they had not been either accurately or fully delineated. Do you have any plans to address those areas with any further delineation?
So I believe that you're talking about areas where the flagging essentially is very close to the boundary and may or may not be borderline on the site. So in an abundance of caution and not wanting to trespass, there are areas that we opted not to go to, but those areas are also, they're outward facing onto other properties. Boundaries that are inward facing onto the property were all reviewed. So I believe what Emily, the peer reviewer's comment is that she just doesn't want those areas shown on the plan because they don't actually set any buffer zone that is on the property, unless I am not understanding which areas are being
I
discussed.
think one of them was WGR2, where from talking to Emily, she said that there was kind of dense thicket in that area. And so it didn't get delineated when she went out with you, or didn't get reviewed. Emily, do you want to clarify that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to chime in. For the record, Emily Stockman, professional wetland scientist and peer reviewer for the Shutesbury Conservation Commission. The area in question is an upland wetland boundary associated with a northerly extent of WGR2. It is an area on the westerly side where the shrub layer was incredibly dense and the flagging was not apparent when I was out in the field with Greg Russo. Oh, okay.
Thank you. Bringing up a map.
Okay. So on the westerly side, we didn't have what I would deem a clear line of sight to accurately review the boundary. On the easterly side, if you look at map 18 and then map 23, the delineated boundary includes an large length between flag 105 and I believe it's flag, oh, I'm not good, I think I have it here. 164, which was greater than 100 feet in distance. And that is significantly a greater distance than typically we see between delineation flags. The placement of flags is usually in such a manner that you can stand at one flag, look over one shoulder to see the flag you were just at, look over the next shoulder to see the flag you're going to, so that you have a clear assessment of that boundary to opine on. So in that area, the concern was twofold: the distance between the flags on the easterly side and the lack of a line of sight and the condition of the flagging on the westerly side. When I was in the field with Mr. Russo, and I'm always uncomfortable summarizing someone else's comments, but it was my understanding that he was of the opinion that because this was such a narrow section of upland, that there would be no potential future use in it. And so omitting it from the review and any subsequent approval under the ANRAD was the route in which TRC would go.
Maria, do you want to respond to that?
I have not heard this before. I'm trying to find the comment that references this in comments that we've received.
It's in Emily's reports.
I know I'm trying to find it because I just don't remember this.
Yeah,
I do remember.
I have to stop screen sharing to get to.
I think it might be in the November 19th, 2021 letter,
Thank you.
3F.
I'm gonna
Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's.
Let me see if it's in the last one. I think you've restated a few times, but let me look. It's actually in the 1222 one. Let me see if I can share this. 1222 here. I have it highlighted.
Thank you. I see. I mean, I don't know why anyone would have decided to simply not include an area that I
Okay.
I do not know why that was the conversation. I understand that some flags were rather far apart. And my expectation of anyone that has gone out with Emily to review this site when I have not been able to go is that they would make adjustments as needed based on Emily's recommendations, be that adding flags in to more clearly define the boundary or moving flags entirely if something is
So-
not in the correct
So this
place.
would probably require going out and you're adding flags and then having Emily go out and review them for us to
Um,
approve this boundary. Since Emily didn't review flagging. Or the flagging she reviewed was insufficient. So is
I-
that something you want to do?
I would request that this area be looked at as part of the upcoming field review when we give you plans with the new off-site area to the north.
So you would go in and review those flags and add more if you need to, and then Emily will confirm them when she comes out to do the field her fields visit with you. Is that what you'd like to propose?
I mean, there is not a specific recommendation in here for exactly what we should do. I think that it would be most efficient and more productive, especially because the new area that you'll be getting is a very small area. It's only about an acre relative to the approximately 90 acres that this entire site is, that they should be able to have time when they are out there that day to look at the area together.
Okay.
Because
So, okay,
there's nothing in here specifically asking us to add flags in. And I understand that that may be what's needed. I was not privy to the conversation that was had in the field, so I don't want to misunderstand what was discussed, but it's sounding to me like there's an area that needs to be adjusted, and because I was not there, I don't personally know what the area is.
Okay, well, thank you. Emily, does that seem agreeable? Does that sound like a plan you?
Yes, and I would just like to clarify, because I do appreciate that Maria wasn't in the field with me that day, but she does have experience being in the field with me during these peer reviews. And as is my standard process, when we came upon this location, I offered up my time to review it that day in the field together. I offered up that TRC could come back on their own time, and then we could reschedule to review together. And then there was the discussion of whether or not that those boundaries would simply be stricken from the review. So this comment is reflecting that I was not called back to the site to review, and I was surprised to see the boundaries still on the latest revisions of the plan. So I wanted to make it clear to the commission that those portions of the boundary had not been reviewed and therefore should not be approved, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Emily.
Thanks for letting me know. And yes, that is how you have operated when I've been in the field with you. I don't doubt that any of that happened. I'm just very surprised that Greg didn't take you up on it.
So Maria, while we're on that topic, I guess, looking at comment number 5 around stream S1. And I just wanted to confirm, is that, it sounds like Emily is saying that has not been delineated or reviewed. And I just wanted to confirm whether or not you plan to do any further delineation in response to her feedback.
No, that particular comment, we would agree with Emily on, that it does not need to be reviewed. That stream that's being referenced there is entirely encompassed within a rather large wetland. So other than literally the flags at the culvert where the stream goes under the road, you'd have to impact a lot of wetland before you'd get anywhere near that stream. And the stream boundary itself is not what's setting the buffer zone, it's the wetland around the stream. So that is not a critical boundary in this case.
Okay. I had a couple more questions and then maybe hear from other people on the commission if they have questions. Do you guys, Mary or Beth, if you have questions, do you want to weigh in? No, okay. The other question I had was around this comment B about the buffer zone boundary associated with flag 27 on page 33. And whether that was the plan was to correct that as well.
We will be looking at that and seeing what happened. It occasionally, especially in an instance where flags have been adjusted, the process on our end in GIS is that we have to reconcile the new flags versus the flags that are no longer current. And it's very possible that there's a spot, like is referenced here, where the buffer zone gets built off of those flags and maybe built off of an old flag that isn't shown anymore, that didn't come out as far. I don't know if that's exactly what happened, but that's my guess. So when we make our next round of revisions, we will be looking at that. To make sure that the buffer zone is coming off of the correct flag.
Okay. Two more questions and then I'll be done. Here, comment number 2 about attachment E and the vernal pool data. And I just, Emily has been carrying these comments forward in all of her peer review comments. Emily, do you want to explain why you're adding that comment and what you mean by it?
And just so that I can summarize your question, you're inquiring about attachment E and the documentation on vernal pool data?
That's correct.
So this comment was provided for the benefit of both the Conservation Commission and the applicant. There were materials provided in the revised ANRAD application that presented vernal pool data for 4 of the identified vernal pools within the study area. However, the documentation that was provided does not fulfill the certification requirements under Massachusetts Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program. It's my understanding that during the ANRAD process, the commission does not have the authority to require certification by natural heritage. However, this is an area and a resource that may come into play moving forward with any notice of intent application. So I felt it important to provide this guidance to the commission and the applicant.
And Maria, would you be expecting that you would be providing this information if a notice of intent was submitted?
As Emily said, it's not typical to require certification during this process. What we discussed in the field quite some time ago and what we provided in the updated application as attachment D was our documentation of what we've observed. Technically, Mass Natural Heritage does not require the applicant or the landowner rather to sign off on certification. Anyone can certify a vernal pool. They encourage you to have the landowner's permission to certify it, but it is technically not required on the form. So our approach in other similar situations has been to provide the documentation like we did in terms of photographs and dates and any location information to the commission so that you can certify or not as you see fit. But it's not something that is typically required for the applicant to go through the process.
I thought for certification, we would need audio recordings or video.
No,
Okay.
The certification criteria allows for more than one avenue. So there's a set of criteria if you're using color photographs for documentation. And then there's another set of criteria if you're doing any sort of video recording or sound recording. They're all acceptable means of documentation as long as the document meets the required criteria: length of recording, length of video, number of photographs, number of egg masses, so on and so forth. At this time, the extent of data that's been provided does not fully comply with all of that criteria. If the commission chose to move forward with certification on their own, you would need to fill in those gaps. And I would also say that I would be hesitant in regards to having the commission move forward with this certification. There is a pretty strong statement on the Heritage website that they strongly encourage that anyone submitting documentation have landowner approval.
So if the landowner approved, the commission could move forward with certifying them.
That would be my
But we would-
recommendation.
but we would need more data. The data is insufficient.
Correct.
Well, maybe we can table this for discussion at the next public hearing. I guess the question I have for the commission is this something we would like them to get more information about, or to get landowner, to see if the landowner would consent?
I'd like to see more information.
What about you, Beth?
Sure. Yeah, sure.
So Maria, on behalf of the commission, would you be willing to communicate this to the landowner and see if they would be willing to cooperate around our gathering more information for the certification?
So we have actually had this discussion with this landowner for a different parcel that they own, but it's the same discussion. And their policy is that they don't specifically give permission to certify pools on their land. They will not stop you from doing that. This land is posted as land that you can walk on. It is not a no trespassing area. So there is nothing stopping you from doing this, but they are not going to explicitly provide permission either.
Okay, and not provide more data. The data collection would have to be by the commission.
Yes.
All right, well, so if that's the case, I guess we can discuss that as a commission, perhaps, whether we want to pursue that, unless the commission wants to discuss it now. What do you think? Beth and Mary?
Sure, we can discuss it now. I think I'd be interested, at least I'd be interested in going and looking at the areas. And yeah, I don't think the natural heritage process is that cumbersome. So if the commission, if all of us agree to go look at those spots, I'd be willing to participate.
Okay.
I agree with
well-
Jeff.
Okay. Emily, would you be willing to give us feedback about, maybe not right now, maybe you could do it in an email, of what data you think we need that we don't have?
Yes, if the commission wants to return to the PDF file from the December 22nd peer review comments, I believe that I did attach to that the certification guidance as well as the forms, so that you would have that.
Okay.
If it's not coming through, I'm more than happy to resubmit those.
Yeah, I
materials.
think the document I've got does not have them attached. I did a
Okay.
shorter document, so I don't have it handy. Okay, so I have one more question. I'm sorry I'm taking up so much time, so please bear with me here. Let me see if I can get to the right document. So the question I have for Maria is about the isolated land subject to flooding calculations, which I'm having. And the question I have about it is, and I'm trying to pull the document up, and it's, yeah, here it is. Can you guys see it?
Yes.
So you provided these upon request from our peer reviewer. And I understand I understand where the calculations are coming from. The question I had was that for wetland GR 16 and 17, I had two questions. One is that you're noting that they were observed outside of the wet period, and that you made calculations based on leaf staining and existing topography. And so I'm curious about how you arrived at the 6-inch depth for WGR 17, and what that was, how many holes was that based on, or samples was that based on, that you came up with 6 inches?
Those are wetlands that I didn't delineate.
Okay.
So I will have to get back to you on that. I will need to talk with Greg.
And I guess I understand what you mean by saying that this was a conservative estimate, but I'm just wondering, how do you determine that it's conservative when you did it during a dry period of the year? How could it be?
Okay, so it's conservative because leaf staining, in instances where you have land subject to flooding, you typically have leaf staining that shows you where water has been collecting and staying for a prolonged period of time. So outside of the maximum flooding period, leaf staining is considered for how to figure out where the extent of flooding is. And leaf staining is not present within the entire wetlands in GR 16 and GR 17. It's only present in a portion of what was delineated. However, for our calculations, we included the entire delineated area. That's why it's conservative. We've included a lot of area that under normal conditions, we very strongly believe would not have any standing water in it.
Okay. Because oh, so this is what you meant when you said on number 2, while no flooding or leaf staining was observed, but you're saying there was some leaf staining observed.
I believe that there was leaf staining observed in wetland 16. In number 17, my understanding is there wasn't, but because it is an isolated feature, we felt it was necessary to do a calculation, and if it had been big enough, then we would have conservatively just said, qualified as land subject to flooding to make sure it's protected.
Emily, and typically, in this kind of a situation, how many samples would you get to determine the water depth?
So I can speak to the state regulations, which define the boundary of isolated land subject to flooding as the perimeter of the largest observed or recorded volume of water confined in said area. Obviously, when we're out there doing assessments for isolated land subject to flooding or wetlands, we don't always actually have the water depending on the time of year. So there are other indicators of hydrology, such as the leaf staining that Maria referred to, that can be used to determine maximum extent of flooding. The commission should be aware that if there is a conflict of opinion in regards to how these measurements were taken, how many, at what locations, there, under the state regulations, there is an engineering practice that can be performed to assess site-specific topography and run HydroCAD modeling to provide an additional level of detail in this assessment.
And that would be done even in an ANRAD process?
If the commission felt that the means and methods presented by TRC were not sufficient, if you had a conflict of opinion on that, there is language in the regulations that guide you under an ANRAD to review it through that survey and calculation methodology to address any conflict of opinion.
Okay. And in terms of what information we should be asking from them about their methodology, Emily, I'm guessing we would want to know what time of year and how many test sites?
I believe they've provided the time of year for you. I believe they provided the methodology of establishing, assessing flooding without water using other indicators. It sounds like Maria wasn't directly involved with this, so perhaps she can circle back and get a little more detail on where the data was collected and how many points were collected.
Oh, and what time of year was it, Maria? Because it's outside of March to June, but I don't know. Was it October? Because I know you were out in
August.
October. What? It was
I
August.
believe that the south area was done July and August. The
Of
end of
2020.
July, beginning of August is when the area south of Carver Road was delineated originally.
Okay. All right. Well, you'll get back to us with some information. Are there any other questions from folks before were there any other comments, Emily, that you wanted to share with the commission before we move to public comment?
No, not at this time, just present to answer any questions that I can.
We did have Emily and I did have a discussion about this information and about the bylaw protecting a resource area called subsurface streams. And I wonder if maybe now is a good time for us to discuss that briefly. Is that acceptable for us to have a brief discussion about that?
I'm happy to speak to that at this time, if that's what the commission would like to do.
Yeah, and the feedback I can just share is that conversation I had with Donna McNichol, our town council, is that she confirmed that this is a resource area under the jurisdiction of the local bylaw, subsurface streams as well as surface streams. So the sense I have, and I'm summarizing, so correct me if I'm wrong, is that if the commission has reasonable degree of evidence and confidence that there is the existence of a subsurface stream in a given area, which of course would not have been delineated by the ANRAD process, we would reserve jurisdiction for future projects. We would reserve the jurisdiction under the bylaw to review future projects for any adverse impacts on this particular resource area. Am I saying that correctly? Donna is nodding. So Emily, do you want to
And
comment?
just making sure on the NRAD that, clearly you haven't delineated it as of this time and it's not an approved area.
Right. Which I believe would mean that if we find that such a resource area exists and needs to be further investigated, it would have to be reviewed under a notice of intent under the bylaw, even if the development was remaining outside of the buffer zones. If we found the existence of such a resource area, because it is a different resource area than are being delineated by this delineation in these buffer zones. Is that correct, everybody? Do you want to comment, Emily? You want to say something? You sound like you had some comments.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up an excellent point about the bylaw. The bylaw does name subsurface waterways and water bodies as a resource area. And as you summarized, if the commission determined that said resource area was present, that would have to be reviewed under a separate process than the current ANRAD that does not demarcate any, I'm just going to say subsurface resource area. The challenge before the commission at this time, the applicant, and I would say the residents of Shutesbury, is that although subsurface flow is named as a resource area, the regulations provide no definition of what subsurface flow is, no definition of how the boundary of subsurface flow is determined, and no definition of the methodology that should be employed to determine the boundary.
So some more work for us.
Yes.
Well, and I think it's a new area. I'd wonder how many other towns, other commissions have dealt with that kind of thing. And I think we would need to research it a little bit to be able to assess it ourselves.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I think
we would need to do some research on this.
if I may, through the chair, Emily Stockman again. Yes, Beth, I think you bring up some excellent points. I can say that I have no direct professional experience with establishing a field-based methodology for aquifers or subsurface waters. What knowledge I do have as far as that assessment process is it's typically performed through some type of modeling with maybe some ground truthing, because we always want ground truthing with our modeling. But I would strongly recommend that the commission, investigate other bylaws and also the scientific knowledge base as far as what other agencies are requiring this type of determination and what models they're using.
Yeah.
I think we're going to be hard put to find other towns with this particular resource area, but I think we may very well be the only community that has it as a bylaw. I've started a little research into this area, and I do see that there are models that are used to investigate ground flow, subsurface flow for development projects. And there are manuals. I found a manual from USGS that outlines a methodology. I spoke with a geotechnical engineer about this, and we may want to consult with a hydrogeologist to help inform any models or regulations that we wanted to implement, because it's really kind of either in hydrogeology or geotechnical engineering's wheelhouse. It's not really a wetland science methodology. It's my understanding. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
That's kind of what you're saying.
yeah, that's where I was heading down. I just want to throw out that there is a group in Amherst, that the Water Supply Protection Committee has started a subcommittee that's looking into kind of that very thing, the effect of large scale solar on groundwater and surface water and drinking water. And that's a group that includes some hydrogeologists and hydraulic folks. So that there's a few people looking into it. So maybe we can get some help there.
Yes, that'd be great to learn what they're doing. Be very
Yeah.
helpful. All right, let's move on, because I want to, it's getting late and I do want to give some opportunity for public comment. And I'm sorry it's taken us so long to get through these questions. I appreciate everybody's patience. Since they've asked in advance, I'm going to allow Ken Holt and Carlos each to have 5 minutes to talk. If you're not keeping track of your time, Penny will keep track. Penny, you're still here, right? Yes. Who wants to go first?
Go.
Ken,
Go
you
for
want
it.
to go first?
Yeah.
All right, you had a PowerPoint, which I will pull up for you. Hang on one sec. I have it queued. Give me one sec. And share screen. Okay, go ahead.
This map gives a visual display of the potential impact of this site development on water resources and flooding. Over 200 million gallons of rainfall per year fall on the site, 400 million if the whole catchment area is included. The site consists of deep, steep, varied terrain, a complex network of streams and wetlands, and the map only shows the surface streams. Subsurface streams may be equally as important to resources, and this is why we need to discover ways to estimate the subsurface streams. So where does all this rainwater go? The red lines show the flow of water out of the site to the north, south, and east. To the north, water flows from the site along streams and wetlands bordering the homes on Montague Road into an aquifer that's in yellow at the end of Montague Road and into Leverett. The stream runs down Dudleyville Road and eventually to Sawmill River. Who knows how many people's drinking water may be affected along that route. To the south, the major headwaters of Roaring Brook emerge from several areas within and passing through the parcel. This is a water resource for the wells of multiple homes on Montague Road. It also feeds the aquifer, again in yellow, down to the southwest, from which many homes derive their water supply on Leverett Road, into Leverett, and possibly Amherst. Roaring Brook runs through 3 beaver ponds in the south. You can actually see those beaver ponds on the map, right before crossing Montague Road. That could act as a perfect catchment for sedimentation pollution that runs from the site. Given the topology, there may be significant flooding of homes in that area. Frighteningly, this flooding may make Montague Road impassable at certain times of the year. To the west, water flows from a ridge into wetlands and backyards of Montague Road residents, again threatening their water supply. The potential environmental devastation, threats to the water resources and flooding of our homes, the tragedy of lost homes, plummeting property values would make the problems in Williamsburg and Conway look trivial. Slide 2, please. This is what 200, could you hit the start button on the on the left side for that. Yeah. And so this is what 400 million gallons of water looks like before it crosses Montague Road to the south. But notice this, as we get to the end of this little video clip, the water flooding through my neighbor's yard is clear. The second picture is the collapse of a culvert passing under Montague Road several years ago, showing the power with which the water flows. These illustrations make clear that we're not talking about some abstract idea involving small streams. This is our water resources reality. Next slide, please. Next slide. So the question is are there engineering solutions to this? Given the steep, varied terrain, the complexity of the network of surface, subsurface streams and wetlands, the same complexity would make not only realistic engineering solutions impossible, it would also make mitigation impossible if there was a disaster. So if you go to slide, this actually is, okay, this is the wrong set of slides. I'm just going to talk the rest out. So
You have 30 seconds left in your 5-minute period.
Okay, let me say that we've been extremely happy with the diligence with which the SEC has investigated and executed its jurisdiction so far. What we would like also is for the town to use all of its regulatory powers to be applied to this project. In light of this, we believe it's within the jurisdiction of the SEC to require that hydrogeological and wetland science studies be conducted, require that environmental and civil engineering studies be conducted, and that these be done by independent professionals for all part of Shutesbury, not just those that abut the site, but are downstream of the site to the north and the south and the west, east, west. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate that. Carlos, do you want to talk?
Yes, so I want to thank you for giving me this time. And I'm so relieved that the commission is considering the subsurface water under its jurisdiction, because I think, it's crucial given that my water comes from a well. And so I'm really happy to hear that, and I thank you. And I would like to make a couple of points that I hope you will find helpful. And that's the spirit in which I'm going to argue these points. And so my understanding, my sense is that the commission has not asked the current NRAD to identify subsurface water, even though it is a water value, and subsurface water may be connecting different wetlands, but it hasn't done so because the jurisdiction refers to the idea of activities, that the commission can only ask this subsurface water to be identified in an NOI, which is about action. And so what I wanted to argue here is that, actually I want to argue that the NRAD is a document about action. The whole purpose and intent, and indeed the practical usefulness of an NRAD, is to identify the areas that where activity and altering can be done without being a threat to water. And so on that level, I think it flies in the face of common sense and what we know about the purpose of an NRAD, to think of it as being dissociated from action. Nobody does an NRAD, nobody is identifying wetlands for the sake identifying wetlands. This kind of a plain common sense purpose and goal in identifying wetlands, which is to identify areas where you can build. And in fact, if we look at the whole process, I think we would all agree that the NRAD is the first stage in a whole process of application to engage in altering of the land. And so what I am saying, what I am arguing here, and you might find it helpful or not, but what I want to argue here is that the commission has the discretion and the latitude to actually ask the proponent to identify the subsurface water right now at this stage. I understand that you might not due to past practice, but I think there is a logical reason to argue this. And more so, I would also say that I was looking at the bylaw and I was looking at the regulations, I was looking at state law, and there is no legal reason. There is no legal reason that would preclude or limit the Conservation Commission to apply its full discretion and latitude in the application of the Shutesbury Wetlands Bylaw. I think what's at stake here is precisely the ability and the empowerment of the community of the Conservation Commission, and yes, the community, to see its local regulatory framework fully implemented. And so I would want to encourage you, and I do think, in my humble opinion, that this is actually a legal argument with some merit, and that I would like you to take into consideration. And so if you were going
left.
Okay, so if you are going to do that, then it would be clear that the NRAD is in clear violation of the bylaw. This current NRAD, that it's in clear violation of the bylaw, and it should be rejected, not approved, until it's fully done. So that's my point about this. I just wanted to add another point about identification.
I think we're out of time, Carlos. Are we? Penny?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Carlos. I know we will have more comments. I don't know if we want to take a pause right now to maybe consult with town council about this, what you're raising about the bylaw. Donna, do you want to make any comments in response to that, since you're here? Or do you want, or do you want to wait until we finished public comment?
It's up to you if you want me to comment now.
Well, why don't we wait a few minutes? I see Sharon and then Anthony and David. And then I don't know who else after that, but Sharon, why don't you go first?
Can you just remind people to give their first and last name before they speak?
And your address, please.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so Sharon Weisenbaum, 712 Pratt Corner Road. So I want to say that I agree with Carlos and Ken, and I want to thank the Conservation Commission and the town of Shutesbury for creating such protective bylaws. And I want to say, when I first bought my farm on Pratt Corner Road 5 years ago, I didn't know much about Shutesbury or the Concom. I wanted to dig out a ditch that had turned to swamp. I thought I could just do it because the land was mine. And the Concom got wind of my plans and issued a cease and desist order. Penny Jock then came out to my farm and delineated the wetlands, and I had a steep learning curve. It turns out I was not allowed to disrupt the wetland that had grown in this ditch. The benefit of the town bylaws for me as a landowner were that I got to learn how interconnected I am to my neighbors and to the surrounding ecosystem. It was not hard to feel profound appreciation for the bylaws that, while stopping me from doing what I initially felt entitled to, ended up helping me see how interconnected we all are. The most impressive realization for me was how the water on my land actually runs through my land, running downhill from me to flow through the land of many others. I could see that I personally do not and cannot own this water, as it's part of a complex watershed. This relates to the NRED submitted to the COMCON by TRC of the AMP Corporation. I wanted to make sure that people know that the center of Shutesbury
You
is,
have 30 seconds.
okay, 1,200 feet high, and the same as Mount Toby and Mount Tom, and that the center of the Amherst is 900 feet below the center of Shutesbury. The water runs downhill from here to supply the wells of most of the Shutesbury residents and to the Atkins Reservoir that supplies half of the clean water to Amherst.
Thank
So the
you.
reason we have bylaws
you,
is to
Sharon.
protect our water.
All right, thank you,
Thank
Sharon.
you.
I'm going to have to interrupt people. I'm sorry because we can keep moving.
It's
Anthony,
okay. I appreciate it. Thank you.
thank you for talking. Anthony.
Hi, my name is Anthony. I live on Baker Road. I want to echo Sharon's comments about appreciating Conservation Commission in Shutesbury and the bylaws. A lot of focus is being put on water, which is incredibly important, incredibly valid. Not only the wells of individuals, anything running off to the east is going to run towards the Quabbin Reservoir, which, as you all know, supplies the drinking water to Metro Boston area. Huge, one of the largest reservoirs in New England. So that I think isn't getting enough attention. But in addition to concerns of water, what about the concern? One of my major concerns is the carbon sequestration, this forest, the massive amount of forest that that would be removed in order to accomplish this project. And I imagine the landowner has probably had this large area of forest, this land, in a 61A designation. I would imagine designated as agricultural land, most likely, as they are logging. The Coles family is a logging organization. And so if they've been paying, getting a huge tax break on a 61A for all of these years that their family has owned this land, are they then, if this huge solar project is going to go onto this property, are they going to pay back taxes on all the years that they've gotten a agricultural or 61A designation for being logging area? Or are they going to get a huge break on this, and the town is going to be left with yet on top of how many other ways this is going to be negative financially for the town? Yet
25
another,
seconds.
thanks, that yet another smear on the town.
Okay, thank
this.
you. We're going to have to move on. Thank you, Anthony. And when you're finished talking, if you could raise your hand. Then we have David Buchanan.
Hi, I'm Dave Buchanan. I live at 541 West Pelham Road here in Shutesbury. And just want to thank the commission again for all your service to the community and for making it possible to hear comments on this issue. I'm here to endorse what Carlos and Ken just so eloquently described and outlined. And I just want to urge you as a commission to exercise your authority to ensure that our town bylaws regarding wetlands and the preservation of the clean water are applied to the fullest. We're a local control state, let's act locally. The town enacted the bylaws to preserve the entire watershed, not just wetland within arbitrarily defined areas. Let's not miss the forest for the trees. I'm going to skip some of these additional comments just to save time here, and appreciate your patience with this whole process too. But I would just say in closing here that there's no doubt incredibly powerful forces pushing hard on the commission to make this project proceed. I've worked in government myself for much of my career, and I do have some understanding of that. And I suspect that you're under considerable pressure to concede to these forces. We as a town should not be railroaded into a short-sighted decision that will sacrifice our wetlands and forests and the clean water they provide. Please stand up for our town, for us, and for the land and water that will pass on to future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next I have Remy Fernandez O'Brien.
Hello, Remy Fernandez O'Brien. I live at 6 Old Egypt Road here in Shutesbury. I'd like to thank the commission for hosting this conversation. So I wanted to say first that I also agree with the legal interpretation brought forward by Ken and Carlos. And I speak as someone who is 31 years old and planning to drink the water here for the next 50, maybe 60 years. So I would prefer that we take all of the steps and err on the side of caution to protect our water. I'd also like to add, just for the purposes of information, that we spoke to a couple of engineering companies about the methodology to identify subsurface water. And it includes the digging of wells, and we believe that they would have to dig about 200 wells for an area of this size to be in compliance. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next I have Thomas Matsuda.
Hi, everyone. Thomas Matsuda from Leverett, 93 Caveville Road. I'd like to thank all of you for your consideration in this project. And I am concerned because of the being adjacent to Shutesbury, and worried about the water and about the whole solar issue of cutting trees to build solar. That's all. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Robert Price.
Yeah, hi, my name is Robert Price at Pelham Hill Road in Shutesbury. I just want to say thank you to the Conservation Committee and to applaud the Conservation Committee for this meeting tonight. I was a bit on the edge tonight about the water, but I hear a lot of serious talk about undersurface or subsurface water movement and taking it seriously and studying it. And I think that's just fantastic. And the interest that the Conservation Committee has shown in studying that, and they're open to it, I think is quite important. And it should really be applauded to this committee for taking this issue so seriously. And really, I take my hat off to you. You have quite a job ahead, and it sounds like you're really up for it. And really, I want to applaud you for your work. Thank you. And thank you for the previous speakers who spoke tonight, Carlos and Ken. Nice job. Thank you. And well, one more comment. Hold on.
There are two hands raised in this household. I'm Rebecca Rivka Edelson, the same household. And I just wanted to echo what Carlos and Ken said. I think this is an extremely important issue. And I feel like the Conservation Commission must be under a great deal of pressure from powerful forces. And I really do hope that you stand up for the town members. We want to protect our water supply. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next we have, I see Anthony Brogno's hand raised, but I think you've already spoken. I'm trying to think, is there anybody else who has their hand raised? Or wants to speak before I start? I see Marianne Connor. So I would like to give other people a chance to talk. So go ahead, Marianne.
Yeah, she's muted.
I'm muted. I'm Marianne Connor. I live at 72 Baker Road in the Sirius Eco Village community. And I just wanted to express that, as many here have said, that I'm deeply concerned about subsurface water and how that might affect the runoff from the solar array. I'm also really committed to not taking out forests to put in solar. I really think that's a very counterproductive, non-regenerative approach to our future. We have plenty of places we can build solar on built environments and should not be taking out one of the best carbon sinks we have. And also, this much forest removed will also affect rainfall and in the microclimate. So we should think very, very carefully before we go forward with these projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. I just want to advise people that we have a very specific task here, and it's helpful to us if you can keep your comments focused to what the Conservation Commission is doing. We're not approving any solar projects. There are no solar projects presented to us at this point. So that's not what the job of this public hearing is. And we aren't going to be making any decisions about solar projects. But thank you. Until a solar project is presented to us. Are there any more public comments, or should we go back to our discussion with town council? I don't see any more comments, but if there are any. So,
Charles was raising his hand. I think he might not know how to use the raise hand function. Charles Gatian.
I don't see him. Okay, is there a Charles here? I don't see him.
Miriam,
that is video on.
This is Mary Lou Conca. He is on mute, but he's putting his hand up.
Okay, well, Charles, can you
So I guess no one can hear me, unfortunately.
We can hear you.
Oh, you can.
We can hear you now.
I'm not a Zoomer, so this is all new to me. Yeah, briefly, 196 Montague Road here. And I just wanted to state that I do share some of the concerns presented tonight by Kenneth and Carlos. There seems to be enough evidence here to suggest that, yeah, it would be wise to further investigate what's going on under the surface with the subsurface water. And yeah, I don't really know a whole lot more about the issue, but just based on everything that I've read over the last month on Nextdoor, all the conversations that have been had, it definitely seems as though more information might need to be gathered to really make an educated decision in this matter. That's pretty much all I had to say.
Okay, thank you. I'm seeing Anthony, you still have your hand raised. Do you want to make a brief comment? I know you already spoke, but it sounds like you have something you want to add.
I just have a couple questions. So if this meeting has nothing to do with maybe not an application that's currently filed, but perhaps an application that's intended to be filed, I think we can all agree that we're talking about something just because it hasn't technically, an application hasn't been made. That's what this is about. And so in that, does the are these questions, I've heard a lot of questions, some my own and others, being taken down to be answered at some point by either the person, the entity that has not applied yet, or the Conservation Commission? And what exactly, why is this ANRAD, and why are we discussing these bylaws if there's no projects in the works or intended?
Well, let me try to respond to that, and people can weigh in. The ANRAD is separate process from the permitting of an actual development project. We are not issuing a permit or reviewing a permit application for a development project in this public meeting. What we are doing is reviewing the wetland resource areas and the boundaries of them so that the landowner knows where the commission believes these resource areas are. Obviously, that is one step in the planning process. I think it remains to be decided or determined whether it's a necessary and intrinsic component of the planning and application process as has been proposed. You can do an ANRAD delineation and have no project. You can't do a project without a wetland delineation. So one is dependent on the other, but they don't go hand in hand. And I think we will need to get some guidance from town council about what her thoughts are about that. So that's one of the questions here. But we have to kind of be careful and not get ahead of our skis in the sense that we are not approving or disapproving a solar project. We are tasked with the application before us, and that's defining the lane that we're in right now. When and if an applicant comes forward here with a solar project, then we will review the impacts on the resource areas by whatever they are proposing. But we don't know yet what they would be proposing because that has not been submitted to us. So there are a lot of unanswered questions that we're not ready. We don't have answers to. I see Jack Hirsch, and then I see Avery Banfield. Do you want to go first, Jack?
Are you talking to Avery or the?
Yes.
Well, first of
Hi,
all,
thanks.
Wait.
go ahead.
Oh,
Go,
who's
Jack.
going first?
Jack.
Okay, okay, thank you. Jack Hirsch, I live on Flat Hills Road in Amherst, so I'm actually a neighbor of Shutesbury's. You're all of a block away. And obviously, I have a well, and Atkins Reservoir is right down the street. So I'm particularly concerned about Ken's pointed direction of water flow. And I have a couple of questions. Do you inform Amherst about the possible threat to its watershed? And what is your responsibility in terms of protecting a neighboring town who, when, you know, our drinking reservoir is in Shutesbury?
Well, that's a really good question. I know that the town of Amherst water department was informed of, I think it was the Pratt Corner South project because it's in their watershed. Beth, do you have an answer for this? Maybe Beth, who works for the Amherst Water Department?
Yeah, Amherst is very aware of what's going on in Shutesbury and Pelham. And the Water Supply Protection Committee, which I actually staff, is doing some of their own research. And so yeah, the town of Amherst is aware. And if the Shutesbury Conservation Commission eventually requests sort of an opinion from the town of Amherst, from the DPW, from the water department as to their opinion of the impact of these solar projects on Amherst drinking water. And I know that the Water Supply Protection Committee and DPW will be responding with an opinion letter, sort of as to how they feel these projects can affect the Amherst Atkins Reservoir, specifically for the Shutesbury projects. So yeah, everybody's aware, everybody's looking into it.
I know there was an Avery who had a comment, and I'm also looking at the time. We're going longer than we expected because we started late, and I wanted to make sure we had a good chunk of time for public comment, but I do want to have some time for us to talk with Donna McNichol and before we move out of the hearing. So maybe two more comments. Avery, do you want to go?
My name is Cynthia Banfield Weir. On Zoom, it always comes up as my daughter.
Okay.
So excuse me, I live on 760 Pratt Corner Road. And I'm very concerned about the water issue. And I'm not an attorney. I don't know if you are, but this sort of hair splitting, obviously, maybe there wasn't an application, but there's clearly something going on about somebody wanting to site a solar farm. And it's, to me, I mean, no offense, it just makes no sense to say, well, we're not really talking about that. We are talking about it. We're doing this for a reason. There's got to be a reason. Otherwise, why is the committee meeting to talk about where the water resources are? That makes.
Okay. I'm going to respond to that, Cynthia, for a second.
For a minute. Is there
What?
anyone from, this is Penny, is there someone from the planning board in the audience that can explain the process so everyone understands that the ANRAD is part of the town solar bylaw process before a special permit can be applied for? I saw Jeff Lacy was here before, Michael DiChiara. It seems like a lot of people don't quite understand how the ANRAD fits
Sure.
into.
Well, we can have that conversation, Penny. And maybe Michael could weigh in. He's here, but I just want to respond, and we're not trying to be disingenuous here, Cynthia. It's simply that we are responsible for complying and responding to an application. So what the application is not for us to approve a solar project. The application is to delineate wetlands. And we have to respond to that application. It would be inappropriate for us at this point, for example, I'm just saying hypothetically, to say, we don't believe a solar project should be built on this site when we haven't reviewed a project, there aren't engineering plans, we haven't had third-party review, we haven't had a public hearing to review an engineering design. We can't do that, and nor should we on any project make a decision unilaterally about whether somebody should do a development project, even if it's building a house, until we've actually reviewed plans and seen designs. And that hasn't happened yet. So we can't weigh in on that, nor do I think ethically we should or legally, simply
I
because.
agree, but then why are you talking about it? And I'll stop now, sorry.
Well, what we're
It just-
talking about tonight is wetland delineation and the ANRAD process, which is spelled out by the state regulations. Applicants and landowners have a right to submit plans to the Conservation Commission to have wetlands delineated. They have a legal right to do that. We don't have a right to say unilaterally, we're not going to approve any wetlands on your property for whatever reason, unless we have compelling scientific evidence from credible sources that meet the burden of proof requirements to show that we cannot delineate it. If the evidence shows that a wetland boundary is accurate, then we have to approve it. If the applicant has not met the burden of proof and has not demonstrated a preponderance of evidence that there are at least 50% probability that their delineation is accurate, then we would deny that ANRAD, or we would disapprove a particular boundary in an ANRAD map. But those are what we're constrained by in the ANRAD process. We are talking about subsurface streams. We're paying attention to that. We haven't made any decisions about how we're going to handle that. But I hope that helps.
No, it actually makes it even more confusing. But at any rate, let me just say that, okay, so they're asking you to delineate, whatever that means, the wetland. And after that, you have nothing to do with it. But, I read that little newspaper we get in town that talks about how we preserve conservation and don't dig any holes on your property. So I'm a little confused, and I gotta stop about what's going on.
So yeah, I mean, I will try to respond again, and then I think we need to move on. Yes, we do ask people when they are proposing projects and before they dig, before they engage in ground disturbance, to consider consulting with the Conservation Commission, as we would expect an applicant who wants to build a solar project to consider and consult with us. And one step of it is the ANRAD process. So delineation is a method that is outlined in environmental science and wetland science, as well as in the state law, that has very specific standards and methods for how you identify the outer boundaries of wetlands of different kinds of wetlands. So there is a scientific methodology that we are using that is enshrined in state law and in our bylaw. And that's what the ANRAD is about. Okay. I see a lot more comments, and we really do need to be wrapping this up, and I'd only wanted to have one more comment. So I see 3 hands raised of people who already commented. Can you make it very brief, like 30 seconds, just make a very brief comment? Okay. All right. So I don't know who went first. So Remy, and then Anthony, and then Sharon, and then we're going to move on and have some discussion before we continue the public hearing. So go ahead, Remy.
Yeah, I'll just try to share a perspective on what Ms. Banfield was just talking about, which is I'm a member of Smart Solar Shutesbury, which exists specifically to oppose the solar project, and we agree with Miriam on this point that this is not the moment to be talking about the solar project in general. That this, and if you'd like to talk strategy, please do reach out to us at Smart Solar Shutesbury. There's lots that we can be doing, but I think this is
Thank you.
not the most productive moment.
Thank you, Remy. Anthony.
Yes, thank you. Two very pointed, clear, quick questions. One, can you state for us again, if you haven't already, who the applicant of this ANRAD is, who filed the ANRAD, specifically the entity or person that did that? And Maria Furstenberg, can you state again exactly who you're here representing tonight? Thank you.
So I'm from TRC Companies. We are the applicant's representative. We're their environmental consultant. And the applicant in this instance is WD Coles, the landowner of this property.
Thank you.
And Sharon? You're muted.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to address Jack Hirsch's concern about Amherst knowing, and Beth said, well, Amherst knows, but I've gone door to door in Amherst to talk to people about this, and almost every house I go to, they have no idea this is going on. So I think there's a difference between the town government knowing and the population knowing about this threat to the Amherst water because of the downhill flow from these water supplies. So I just want to make that point that I don't think Amherst really knows what's going on in a big way.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I want to step back now. Thank you for all of the comments. I don't know if it was satisfying or not, if you got answers from me. I did my best. And I just want to say this is not the end of the public hearing process for this. We will be continuing to another date to be determined tonight, I hope. And you are welcome to come, and you are welcome to make public comments and to participate in this process. So we do appreciate your participation. So Donna, one of the questions that's getting raised is how can you decouple delineation from project review? When there's, clearly we review projects under the bylaw, and the language of the bylaws talks about activities, and it defines activities that alter wetlands, including dredging and filling and ground disturbance that have effects on impacts. The activities do not include delineation. That's not identified in the bylaws as one of the regulated activities. So, how would you understand that?
Well, I think that, you don't really decouple it. And I sort of agree with some of the comments that have been made. Truth of the matter is, if you have a project you want to go forward ultimately in Shutesbury, then you need to start with an ANRAD. And the ANRAD is essentially delineating the wetlands. Doesn't have the engineering plans. It doesn't have all of the technical information that will come before the Shutesbury Conservation Commission with a notice of intent to do a project.
Somebody is not muted. Sharon, could you please mute? I'll mute you. Okay, go ahead.
So they're separate and distinct processes, but make no bones about it. They're related, and we're not pretending they're not. Essentially, the first step is to delineate the wetlands, and that's what this process is. And where I think the real issue is in this process is that Shutesbury is a very unique local bylaw. It talks about not only delineating traditional wetlands under the wetland protection bylaws, Emily so clearly pointed out, that is methodology and science behind it and everything else. But as Beth and others have clearly pointed out, it's also got subsurface water as a protected resource. And that's the methodology that really isn't clear at this stage of the game. So we have an ANRAD that all of the standard methodology, wetlands, and the delineation of that can be done. There's another part of our bylaw for this ANRAD that basically has to do with the subsurface water, which is clearly, as everybody's spoken, very important. And the Shutesbury Conservation Commission really, as they've indicated, have some work to do. And I think Beth has given some great suggestions on who to work with to basically move forward and give TRC the methodology and the standards that they want them to move forward in that part of the delineation. Just because you have a delineation in front of you doesn't mean it's a final document. As of right now, I think that their Shutesbury Conservation Commission is looking seriously at what TRC has presented as far as standard wetlands, and is obviously having conversations back and forth with Maria and Emily and everybody to make determinations around the standard wetlands, make sure the flagging's done right, make sure to check the methodology, to make sure that they're all in agreement on how that's done and those designated. The piece that still needs to be developed, and I think that's why part of the approval of this ANRAD may go forward, but still be a big piece to be done, is the subsurface water. Because truthfully, the Shutesbury Conservation Commission has, in all fairness to the applicant, has to give TRC sort of a definition of what we're talking about with subsurface water, basically suggest methodologies, and come up with either hydraulic engineers or others to basically review that delineation and those concerns. And that will be the document that addresses the concerns about under the subsurface water and how it's going to be affected and how it's delineated. Then notice of intent will come in if they can decide to go forward with the project. And then you'll be able to determine how those will be affected. But truthfully, the Conservation Commission has to give a definition, methodology, and get a consultant on board to basically review what TRC says about the subsurface water, so that we can have the exact same discussion about subsurface water that we've had tonight, in part about the traditional wetlands.
Donna, I have a follow-up question for that, because there were 5 ANRADs. Pratt Corner South has already been completed and the ORAD's been issued. Pratt Corner West is being resubmitted, and so we're having a new public hearing and we'll be issuing a new ORAD, and Leverett West has already been closed and an ORAD's been issued. For the future going forward for the applicant, what does the understanding, let's say we go forward and we develop a methodology, we develop a regulation for defining this resource area. What would that mean for those other projects where the ORADs were already issued and this resource area was not raised in that ANRAD public hearing? Would they would still be subject to this resource area because it was never delineated?
I believe they would. I mean, I think that's an excellent question, but just because you've issued an ORAD that says, here's your wetlands, we've delineated, we've approved them, doesn't mean when they file the notice of intent, you can't say to them, okay, as far as the wetlands that we've delineated and approved, you've done, here's what you've done in your notice of intent to deal with that. However, this is what the Shutesbury bylaw says, this is what's beneath it. And we need you to do the same methodology. If they choose to challenge us, so be it, but that would be our
Right.
process.
Because in our ORADs, we approved certain wetlands, but we never said in the findings that there are no subsurface streams.
Exactly.
We didn't say there were, but we didn't say there weren't, and that remains to be a protected resource area.
Right, and ORAD doesn't say we've approved the wetlands you've delineated, and there are no other wetlands on the property, therefore you are clear to go forward with your notice of intent without having to deal with any other wetlands in the future.
Okay.
That's not what it says.
Okay, thank you. I think that's really very helpful, and I find that very clarifying for me. I want to make sure there's time for Beth and Mary, Don and Janice, who are our consultants, and Emily, if you have any other questions that we want Donna to be weighing in on.
Oh, yeah, sort of in that same realm. The ANRAD is a state created document and whatnot. And I guess if we're going to move in the direction of including subsurface streams, I want to be sure, and I'm pretty sure that this is fine, that we can add those to the traditional ANRAD review and the traditional ANRAD document as another resource area. If we were to come up with our
I think
methodology and
because
everything else.
The way that we've written the ORADs is that we've broken them out into two sets of findings. One was the findings under the Wetlands Protection Act, and then a separate set of findings under the bylaw. So it would be under the bylaw that anything would be commented on, not under the Wetlands Protection Act, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Mary, do you have any comments or questions?
No,
Don?
I think Donna's done a good job to help clarify some of the questions that I had, so.
Okay.
I just caution that I want to make sure the ANRADs from here on out, just like I said about changing the bylaw about notice and hearing and stuff, that the ANRADs going forward are very clear that not all wetlands have been delineated to our satisfaction, and so that process will continue. But until we have a methodology, as Beth talked about, and going to the Amherst group, I think is an excellent place to start. We need to get that information to applicants.
Yes, we do. I agree. We need to be, and we need it for ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, go ahead, Beth.
I'm just thinking of, and traditionally, the wetlands are, the actual resource area is bank, or the actual resource area is land underwater, where the goal of the bylaw, of all the bylaws, are always to protect, and you list, intermittent streams, perennial streams, lakes, ponds, that's sort of in the preamble of a bylaw. But then when you get to the jurisdictional section, it's traditionally more, you're looking at bank as the actual resource area, and that's what gets delineated. And there's a very detailed definition of what bank is to help delineations be done. And, so to be just talking about underground streams and trying to figure out how we would identify their locations and their edges, and, if we're giving them buffer zones, all those things, it's a big thing to tackle, really.
It is. Though there are parameters out there. I mean, I just starting to read a little bit about it. It sounds to me like there are models for quantifying and delineating subsurface flow. And it may be that that's going to be, or something like that would be the measurement, if you will, that we would be looking for information about in order to decide whether, because really the reason why we want to know, is a project going to have an adverse or cumulative adverse impact on this protected resource area. So we need to know where it is, and we need to be able to find a way to judge how a development project might impact that area. That's kind of.
And because they're unseen, it's going to have to be scientific methodology.
Right.
Because, I think I'm assuming we'd be looking at water quality and water quantity impacts from a project on subsurface flow.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's calculations for stormwater flow, which is more of a surface evaluation. HydroCAD programs are certainly done for stormwater flow on the surface level, but I don't know much about the subsurface level.
Well, there are some models out there. It's you know, I think that we need to do some more research, and we may need to get a consultant to help us with this. I mean, I think that's something, maybe, you know, we do have some money available to us for our own consultants, separate from the ANRAD consultant. And it may be what we need to do in order to really do this right is to get a hydrogeologist to advise us and help us develop a model. And help us develop the regulations or some such, or a, you know, an engineer, whichever discipline makes the most sense.
But it needs to be done so that you can pass it on to the applicants so that, you know, if and when they come back or as this process moves forward, they can do it. If you don't have a methodology, you don't have a definition, you don't have anything, then you know, I don't know how you're going to not approve.
Yes.
If you don't have the information, just because there may be something there.
Maria, do you have, I know this is hard to ask, but do you have and you may not even be allowed to say anything, but do you have any idea of the timeframes for the first notice of intent?
I do not. I know that there are a lot of considerations around timing that are both related to Shutesbury's regulations, as well as, I believe, the entire interconnection study for the area. So I believe that there are factors related to both of those things that are ultimately dictating the timeline on future submissions.
So
and
maybe
I don't know what the exact timeline is.
But you're not
I
right
do
this
know things.
moment. You're not at this moment working on an NOI that is ready to stick in the mail. Sounds like.
I do not have an NOI to stick in the mail for you
Okay,
today.
that's good to know. It's probably as much information as would be, but we will work on this. Certainly, we're going to do our due diligence. I want to assure everybody here that we are going to work on this and try to come up with the best approach. And I think that, you know, we want TRC to know and your clients to know that, you know, this is a factor. And if they were considering that perhaps an NOI was not going to be required because a project was going to stay out of buffer zones, you know, we're going to have to think about whether or not the commission believes an NOI is required under the bylaw. And perhaps if there is an area of question that will need to be consulted about that, make a determination about whether we want to require an NOI or not. Carlos, I see you've got your hand raised. We kind of ended the public comment period, but if you want to make a comment, go ahead, a brief one, please.
Now, I just have a very quick question, and that is it possible, would the proponent bypass the notice of intent stage if they filed a special permit with variances? At this point, I mean, this hinges on a notice of intent. Is that a process by which this stage of an NOI could in fact be bypassed? And so
No.
all of our concerns would be null.
It's not something that could be bypassed. It's if we are doing something that the commission believes could be within their jurisdiction, then we have to file a notice of intent with them.
Thank you.
It is the special permit process is independent of what the Conservation Commission does. The two boards will talk to each other about things, but the two decisions are technically independent and they require their own filings.
Let me just add a piece of clarification about this, because while they're independent, they're not exactly independent, because the special permit zoning requirements are, I believe, under the solar bylaw, but also perhaps under general zoning as well for special permits, that you have to be in compliance with all local bylaws and state and federal laws, which means that if the local bylaw has a requirement, you have to be in compliance with that in order to be granted a special permit. So my expectation would be that, and maybe Donna, you can correct me about process, but if a situation came where an applicant, because we have this, sometimes we'll have somebody who's applied for a special permit and they apply for a notice of intent at the same time. And you know, what has happened in the past is that when the special permit was approved, it had some condition in it that the applicant had to be in compliance with the order of conditions issued by the Conservation Commission, because, you know, they didn't. So yes, they're decoupled in a certain way, but on one level, they're not decoupled at all, because the special permit can't go forward if there's an order of conditions that hasn't been granted yet.
The simplest answer to
absolutely
your
correct.
question, yeah, the simplest answer to your question, Carlos, planning board does not have jurisdiction to waive Conservation Commission jurisdiction. The boards do not have the right to grant variances. Planning board can't grant a variance against the Conservation Commission. Conservation Commission can't grant a variance or against the planning board. So they don't, there's no way that could happen.
Thank you.
I'm thinking that it's 9:17. We still have a couple of agenda items. And so I'd like to see if we can move on to continue the public hearing if we feel like we've gotten to a place tonight. Maria, do you have a date for when you want to continue to?
Yes, I was just looking at the calendar. So I'm going to think out loud here just so you can tell me if I'm being crazy. I think our hope is that we would be able to delineate the additional off-property area at the beginning of April. So your first meeting in April is the 14th and your second is the 28th. So if we were very on top of things and very fortunate weather-wise, we would have to get you plans on the 14th in order to make the meeting on the 28th. I'm not sure that that's realistic, just based on past experience with the weather out in your area. So I think my recommendation is, or my request would be to continue to the first meeting in May, which I believe is May 12th.
Okay, at 7:30, is that all right?
Sure.
Because I don't have anything else planned that night. Okay, so are we all done? Everybody, commissioners, any other comments from commissioners? Okay. All right, I'll make a motion that we continue the public hearing for the Montague Carver ANRAD to Thursday, May 12th at 7:30 p.m. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Beth seconds. So David?
Aye.
Stefan, aye. Wilson?
Aye.
Okay. All right, so that concludes this part of our evening. And thank you, everybody, for your participation, for coming, and for caring about water resources in our community as we do. The next item, and I know, Donna, you might want to stay for this, is we're going to have if you can hang on a little longer. The next item was we were going to have a brief conversation about a concern that Leslie Carrier on Schoolhouse Road has raised about forest cutting. And what I've advised is that we're really going to keep this brief. So I'm going to let Leslie have 2 or 3 minutes to share her concerns, and then we're going to have a discussion amongst the commissioners and Donna, and then figure out what we're going to do next. Go ahead, Leslie.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for taking the time, and thank you to all my family, my friends, my neighbors for logging on. I mean, thank you. I have a well-researched and reasonable request, and this is for the COMCOM to actually do a site visit, for Dan McLean of 40 Schoolhouse Road to move his tree cutting plans, which were also obsolete, 100 feet out of the wetlands to follow the Shutesbury Wetlands Protection Bylaw. I've also given the Conservation Commission 4 short videos. I believe they're less than 3 minutes total, that I took on an unusually 60-degree day, February 23rd. And these show the wetlands on Schoolhouse Road, my property, where there is a culvert going from underneath Dan's driveway to my property that goes underneath Schoolhouse Road and is flowing constantly. I can only imagine the flooding that would happen to Schoolhouse Road and my property, as well as my neighbor's property up and down Schoolhouse Road and on both sides of the property, plus the damage to my well, as well as other neighbors' property. All the same concerns that Carlos and Ken have presented. One of the videos even showed Dan's muddy driveway from the bottom of Schoolhouse Road. And I know in his cutting plans, he's planning on taking out more trees up his driveway, which is, I can only imagine, again, more flooding. And also damage to Baker Road. My livelihood would be destroyed also because I work on my property, and I also have 14 no-till organic gardens, and they are pretty close to the back boundary, which could also be flooded. I know the cutting plan has about 88 cords to come out, and I'm still scratching my head why, but that's Dan's property. I'm just asking him, please, please do not cut in the wetlands, move back the cuts. He's got plenty of land that could be dry. And I think that would be a great idea to just move it back. According to the Shutesbury Wetlands Protection Bylaws, the Conservation Commission has the jurisdiction in Section 2 over these obsolete cutting plans. That would be Section 2A, Section 2B, and Section 2B, Section 2C. Section 3C also says there are no exemptions for agriculture or forestry. Sections 9H include no destruction of plant life, including but not limited to trees. Section 9I relates to water temperature that must be preserved in the wetlands. If the trees are cut in the wetlands, there will be more sunlight in the wetlands, algae grows, more mosquitoes come, water temperature increases, amphibians can't reproduce. Many, many things will happen to the integrity of the wetlands if those cuts are happening. Section 13, the relation to the Wetlands Protection Act, also says the bylaws adapted under the Home Rule Amendment of the Massachusetts Constitution and Home Rule statutes, independent of the Wetland Protection Act, General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, and regulations thereunder. In other words, no exemptions. And the wetlands are important to maintain and even slow climate change. Dan's cutting plans will speed up climate change. I've also spoken to Stephen Garabedian, a prominent hydrologist that I spoke to before he went on vacation in February. He gave me some great advice, also happy to share that if I have more time. But essentially, there's a lot of permits involved with cutting in the wetlands. I didn't see anything on that cutting plans. Earlier in this discussion, we talked about abutters should get a written certified paper notice. I didn't get one, neither did the other abutters. Also, Dan's cutting plans I mentioned are obsolete, originally made in 2013. Those cutting plans, or any cutting plan, should be less than 3 years old. And let's see. Last but not least, I think we need a second opinion. I've got Don also Wakaluk, our amazing tree warden, is also a soil scientist. And for the record, he also submitted a hydric soil map showing where the cutting plans are in the wetlands, which would have been great if Dan's cutting plans actually delineated all that. So for those reasons, I believe that the cutting plans should be rejected, because not only are they incomplete without delineation or characteristics of the wetlands there, they're also violating the Shutesbury protection of the wetlands bylaw. I'm going to just take a quick look to make sure I didn't leave anything out. There's also a soil scientist, Ward Smith, that I would love to have the Conservation Commission have a look at Dan's cutting plans, because he understands about delineation plans, which were missing from Dan's plans. And I've consulted a lawyer, and I'd love the Conservation Commission to also consult that lawyer, because I heard from Rita Farrell that the Conservation Commission can get additional funds to consult another lawyer unless Donna McNichols decides that the Conservation Commission has the jurisdiction to implement our Shutesbury wetlands protection bylaws. And I agree with everything that Ken and Carlos said earlier, because all this also relates to this. Thank you for listening. Thank you to all my neighbors on Schoolhouse Road who logged in today. Thank you for everybody on here to listen, and thank you for considering a site visit. Thank you.
Donna, do you want to maybe give us your take on this?
Yeah, I think the,
Maybe is it all clear to the rest of the public kind of what's going on, that Leslie has a neighbor who's got a forest cutting plan, and there's wetlands in that property that drain onto Leslie's property and some other neighbors' properties, and there's concerns about that. So go ahead, Donna.
yeah, the problem is the Shutesbury bylaw can't say that agricultural and forestry aren't exempt. The case law is very, very clear. Local bylaws can be passed that are stricter than the State Wetlands Act, but they can't move into other areas that are already preempted by other statutes. And there's clear Attorney General's opinions and case laws that say that the agricultural industries are exempt, and that a local bylaw cannot have that provision. So that's the long and short of it. And if you have an attorney that wants to discuss it with me, I'd be more than happy to discuss it with them. But that is the law.
Thank
Donna,
you.
that is not the law, as I've just stated.
Leslie, please, you got to raise your hand and be recognized.
Oh, sorry.
Right.
I will raise my
And you-
hand. Thank you.
And just to be clear about the bylaw does not have an exemption for agriculture. It's silent on the topic of agriculture. So I believe there is a passage in the bylaw that also says that if the bylaw is in conflict with any state law, that component of the bylaw is invalidated, not the whole bylaw, but that component. And for that reason, historically, the Conservation Commission has not exercised any jurisdiction or asserted any jurisdiction on forest cutting plans and forestry practices because of this preemption issue that would invalidate or invalidates our jurisdiction. Is that correct, Donna?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Mary and Beth, do you guys want to have any comments, any questions?
Yeah, I do have a question. I always was had the understanding that the Concom is allowed to comment on forest cutting plans. So we review them, that they need to be provided to us typically before they're actually signed by a forester. And we review them, and then we can provide DCR with any comments that we have. But I think that is the limit of our role.
Yeah, let me be very clear. I'm not saying that the Concom shouldn't be commenting on these. I'm not saying that he doesn't have an antiquated cutting plan and he should have another one. But that's a DCR issue. That's not a Shutesbury Conservation Commission issue.
Right. But we can provide comments, right,
Right.
to DCR. Yeah.
Absolutely.
We're
I think-
supposed to review them.
One of the challenges for us has been that the forest cutting plans get dropped off. They're not mailed. I typically find them in the inbox without any date received stamp on them. And they're usually beyond the 10-day period by the time I see them. I did send an email to the DCR forester, Andrew Rawcliffe, and asked him, I haven't gotten a response yet, of whether perhaps we could get an email heads up when one of these forest cutting plans is going to be dropped off so that we could retrieve it quickly and then have a commissioner be assigned to review it. And I think that there's like, maybe we can tweak that time frame a little bit better, so that we're not always beyond the 10-day comment period. Emily, I see you have your hand raised.
I do, Miriam. There was something that Leslie had stated that I was hoping could be clarified for the benefit of those of us present. Is there in fact a valid forest cutting plan for this property? I'm a little unclear on that.
I don't know. There is a forest cutting plan. And as far as I know, DCR believes it's valid.
This is Janice. Just on this, the DCR forester did sign it and extended the deadline to sometime in 2023, 22, 29.
The deadline for comment or for completion?
No, for completion.
Yeah.
And is this the one, or was that a different one that we didn't get until after the comment period had passed and the woman at DCR apologized because she was out and no one else had sent it?
No,
that was the other one. Okay. But at any rate, the service forester did sign off on it. So I assume that they consider it effective.
Just for the public to know, when we do get forest cutting plans, we are scanning them and putting them up on our website for the public. So they are, the ones that we have currently are all up there. Don, I know you had your hand. Emily, were you done? Your hand's raised.
I'll put it down. Thank you, Miriam.
Don, you've been waiting a while.
Hi, Don Walklook, Shutesbury Tree Warden. I'd like to remind everyone here that the tree warden has no jurisdiction in interior forests. My jurisdiction exists from the center of the road to 25 feet to the side of the road, usually the utility pole area. However, in this particular case, I have an opinion about this whole matter. The whole business about Shutesbury's wetland bylaw and jurisdiction, I completely disagree with Donna's analysis. And it's pretty clearly stated for anyone that reads our bylaw the way it is currently worded. I'm not saying that it's correctly worded or that it doesn't create a dilemma for the Conservation Commission, but is certainly a jurisdictional area. And the whole problem could have been avoided by the forester simply filing an RDA, which they have never done in the past with forest cutting plans. There is this assumption that forest cutting plans are infallible because they're approved by a service forester. Well, in this particular case, the forester, who is present, by the way, and certainly could answer questions and has remained silent, I would appreciate the fact that I sent them a soils map, a hydric soils map of a very small area of what this wetland is that adjoins this property, and easily could be avoided and taken out of the cut without losing very many trees from the cut. Instead, what we got was this rebuttal from DCR's service forester, which basically said that our wetlands bylaw, the vote that was voted in by our town's population, does not count. Well, I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. And I think that that is a very a shallow opinion from one person that we're hearing. And I'm not talking about Donna. I appreciate Donna's legal opinions here. However, she's not an expert on forestry. Neither is she an expert on wetland delineation. And it was clear to me when I first saw this harvest plan that no delineation had been done. I visited the site in the field and saw no attempt at delineating the wetland. This is a patent disregard for our wetlands bylaw and has nothing to do with the ANRAD process. I am specifically talking about the Forest Cutting Act, and in our case, a wetlands bylaw which does not recognize exceptions. That's written clearly in the bylaw. It's not something you can change by whim because you're implying that some boilerplate from the Attorney General's office assures that we won't make a more restrictive bylaw. This is not more restrictive in any way, shape, or form. No one has asked the neighbor to stop logging. They've simply asked him to avoid the wetland. That's all. It's very simple and straightforward. Thank you.
Okay. Donna, do you have any comments? No.
No, except that he's right. I'm not an expert forester and I'm not an expert wetland. What I'm talking about is preemption law, which is constitutional law, which is neither of those. It's basically says that if there's an area of law that is thoroughly legislated by the state, your local bylaw cannot preempt it. And there's case law that clearly says local wetlands bylaws that basically try and capture jurisdiction of agricultural activities.
May I respond?
And they don't work. Don, I don't know that we can have an off camera.
We can certainly discuss this at another time. I would
I'd be
appreciate
happy
it. They
to.
have a
You can call
shortage
me
of
at the
time
office.
tonight. Thank you.
Okay, and I think the bottom line is, it is the consensus among wetlands consultants I've talked with. I've spoken with Emily Stockman about this. I've had conversations with Janice Stone about this. I consulted with MACC and they consulted with an attorney on their board who gave me the Attorney General's ruling on this issue in response and explained that it is MACC's, the Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commissions, opinion that bylaws are subject to this Attorney General's ruling. So that's coming from somebody who is an expert in environmental law. We're doing our due diligence to not just rubber stamp things and just I don't want people to think we're just, oh, this is the way we've always done it, so we're just going to blindly keep doing it. We're not ignoring the bylaw. We're paying attention very clearly, but it looks like the failure to put an exemption in for agriculture was not surprising given how old this bylaw was. But there are laws that have been passed since the time this bylaw was passed that now create a complication for us. And I think this is an area where perhaps we can promulgate a regulation that provides clarification around this, or perhaps we're going to have to amend the bylaw at some point to add an exemption so there's clarity. But I don't know that we can personally, I can't see that we have jurisdiction to act now. And I think that's the bottom line. And I understand that, folks are upset about that. It's not that we don't care about the wetlands. We do. And, my preference would be that people not log in wetlands. But I don't know that in my role on the commission, I have the authority to regulate that. I don't think I do. Emily, you've got your hand raised.
I do, Miriam, if I may. And I want to thank Donna for the information she's provided. That is my understanding as well, as far as a bylaws authority as it relates. to state law. But Leslie, I'm intrigued by Leslie's presentation and some details that she provided in regards to the activity that's taken place. And my question to Leslie, if I may, through the chair, is my understanding from Janice is that this is a valid cutting plan, having not looked at any documentation, but it was issued and it has been extended. To the best of your knowledge, Leslie, has the state forester made an inspection of the logging as it is occurring?
As far as I know, there's been no inspection. Also, there were blank pages on this cutting plan, even though it was signed off by Andrew Rawcliffe. There was no information supplying where the cuts were made in relationship to streams, stream crossings. Pages 5 and 6 were blank. And that's another reason where I say, let's let them resubmit it and do it right. I mean, this cutting plan also did not send any paper documents to the abutters. I happened to go out in my property, which I often do, and found my trees marked in red and trees beyond it marked in blue. And I called my neighbor. Once I called Shane, Cinda Jones's forester. I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "It's not me." And I said, "Okay." I found out it was Dan. I called Dan, and Dan said to me, "I would never want to flood your property or dry out your well." But he's never called his forester and said, "Hey, let's move the cuts back so we don't ruin any of our neighbors' property." All I'm saying to Dan, and I know you're on this call, Dan, is just move the cuts back. Just based on the fact that the forms are not properly filled out. Thank you very much, Emily, for bringing this up. There have been no inspections. I can't imagine a real forester going in there and saying, "Sure, let's cut the wetlands." I mean, that's just not protecting the wetlands, no matter whether it's the law or the bylaw or the act. And I went by very quickly with all these sections, but they are on the conservation page on the town website. And so you can see them all when I mentioned 2A, B, C, 3C, but also this regulation in section 13, which basically means, even though Donna, might be wishy-washy on it, it basically says no exceptions. And Dan is not doing any agriculture up there. An agricultural exemption would be, let's say he's got a pasture and he wants to extend it to get his cows to drink. There's no farming going up there. So the agricultural exemption is like something that, is wishful thinking. This is a 61, chapter 61 under forestry. And even though some people like to think of forestry as agriculture, it is not. They are not growing trees up there. The forest is growing the trees, it's not a tree farm up there. Thank you for that.
I appreciate your passion in your presentation. And Miriam, if I may, through the chair, I don't mean to take any more of this commission's time on this lengthy night. My intention of commenting was actually to put the bylaw topic to the side based on some of the presentation that I heard. The forestry is considered agriculture under our state regulations. So I'm only going to speak right now to the state regulations. The exemption is closely tied. It's a requirement for the exemption for cutting of a certain size to have a forest cutting plan and for that cutting plan to be adhered to. So if a state forester goes out to review work and the cutting plan is not being followed, then the exemption is not granted in the fullness, and the commission needs to be aware of that. So Miriam, I understand you put a call into the state forester, and I think for the benefit of the commission, it's important for you to work with DCR There was an excellent memorandum of understanding that came out between DEP Wetlands and DCR on how to address this overlap if there is in fact a violation of the cutting plan.
Would you advise us to do a site visit with DCR?
I would advise you to reach out to DCR to see if you could accompany them on the site visit, or if they're planning on one on their own for scheduling purposes, to ask to be updated.
Okay. It's late and I want to just pull the commission and then we're going to move on. I know that people have their hands raised. I am going to allow one more comment from Dan McLean, who has his hand raised because he's been very patiently being not talking about all of this. So Dan, I'd like to give you an opportunity to talk, and then we're going to have a brief conversation among the commission and we're going to move on. So Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to defer to my forester, Eric, who's here tonight with us. And I'd like him to speak to some of the issues that Leslie has addressed.
Okay. Eric, do you want to make a comment on his behalf?
Hi, yeah, I'd love to, thanks. I mostly am here just to introduce myself and on behalf of Dan also. I just want to say briefly, I'm
You're
local.
Eric, do you want to just identify yourself? Because
Eric Donnelly, I own a business called Woodsmith Forestry. And this is Gabrielle, who's one of my employees who's worked on this project also. And we're based in Montague. I grew up in Shutesbury. I've lived here most of my life. So a couple of things I just wanted to say, and I'll try to be as brief as I can. The work we're doing is long-term minded forestry. We're doing, you might have in mind like cutting all the trees. It's a selective harvest. We're trying to grow some of the oaks and the hardwoods that are in there. I did do a site visit with Leslie to explain a lot of this stuff, and I could do another site visit if there's a group of people that are interested in seeing what we're doing. I'm happy to do that.
So you can push the trees back 75 feet.
Yeah, a couple other just corrections here. The cutting plan is completed. There was a little confusion with the DCR clerk being on maternity leave. So that was this project. But the Conservation Commission did get the approved cutting plan. I have it here. There was a site visit by the State Service Forester who signed off on the plan. So that's his signature is down here. And this is a public document. Anybody can look at this.
And the pages 5 and 6 aren't blank.
Yeah, so one other correction, I just have this stuff here in front of me. It is part of the cutting plan to send out these abutters notices by certified mail. I sent one to Leslie. It's right here. So just want to correct some of these things that are inaccurate.
That's not a cutting plan. That's just
Leslie,
like we're going to do some cutting.
I'm sorry, Leslie, you've got to wait.
Okay.
All right. Are you?
And I don't know if there's other things you want me to speak to. The only other thing I'll
Well,
say is
there was a concern about the forest cutting plan being incomplete, that there being pages missing.
the pages 5 and 4 and 5 and 6 are like they're external, like extra pages. If you're doing something non-standard that isn't like a checkbox or an autofill, then you can explain what you're doing. Everything we're doing in here is really standard, so it fits on the regular pages. Like I said, this document is public and anybody can look at it.
Okay.
And we just want to say that we have no intention on encroaching on the wetlands.
Could you identify yourself, please?
I'm Rachel McLean. I live at 40 Schoolhouse Road. We have no intention on encroaching on the wetlands. We have talked with Leslie. We have backed up on the trees. We have agreed with her that we don't intend on encroaching on the wetlands. So this whole conversation is a lot of time for a lot of people. And I think we can talk about this amongst ourselves and we can come to a really common ground. We have not backed off on that. We have been very, very approachable.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think that we're at a point where we're going to end this discussion because I think we've reached the end of where we can have a meaningful role. And I want to be respectful that, you know, there can be disputes among neighbors that we're not empowered to resolve in many, many, many situations. If the commission would like, we can discuss trying to arrange a site visit with the forester. Is that something, Mary and Beth, that you want to do? Do you want to hold off? What do you want to do? What should we do?
I I guess I feel like this is a discussion between the neighbors and with DCR. I guess I would have liked to have seen the forest cutting plan in a timely manner and have reviewed it. But
We can wait for you to do that.
are you going to refile it? Is that what's happening or no?
No, I'm just saying that, you know, we're recognizing that there's a time to cut when it's appropriate for the soil, right? And we might miss that mark, given that the winter is closing. So if you want to review it, go ahead. We've already filed it. It's already been approved. It was approved by the state. So, you know, you can
yeah, but
continue to look at this if you want. We don't have
could
any problem with that. We don't want to intrude on the wetlands. This is
Well,
not, this is a non-issue for us.
I just want to be clear that, you know, if we were to review it, anything we would say would be advisory, not regulatory, right? We don't
Exactly.
have the authority to tell you what to do.
That's
It's a
right.
lot- And I want to be very careful about that, because when we come in as town officials, we're carrying a certain intrinsic authority in our presence, and that can be intimidating. And, you know, we don't want to overstep our role. I don't think anybody in town wants us to overstep our role on people's properties. We certainly step onto people's properties and have input on all sorts of things, but we need to also be careful that we don't overstep. So that's what I'm worried about getting involved at this point. Even doing a site visit is that, you know, it's just inviting an opportunity for us to give opinions that maybe people would rely upon too heavily, because they're really going to be just simply advisory. And Donna, would you agree that that seems like a prudent course of action, just to say we're not going to do?
I think as Emily said, probably if you want to take any action, call DCR. If everything's in order, there's really nothing you can do. And so, you know, maybe facilitate conversations between Leslie and the McLeans to, you know, see if they can, you know, come to agreement on something, but not in your role as town officials.
I mean, you know, you guys could go out together and look at individual trees and perhaps have a back and forth about which trees, you know, are worth avoiding, so that, you know, that everybody's on the same page. But I think you would probably take maybe you and your forester, Dan, and Leslie going out together, and I don't know who else.
Yep, that would be the second go around, and we're willing to do that.
Yeah.
It has happened once. There was a back off, right? There were trees that were unmarked, right? They were unmarked to cut, and we're willing to do it again.
All right, we're gonna move on now.
Yeah.
Very good.
And you know, I hope that this gets resolved in a way that everybody can get some closure on it. All right, we have a couple of more items on our agenda. It is a really late night, but let's try to get through them.
Are you done with me?
I think we are done with you, Donna. Well, we're not done in the larger sense of the word, but for right now.
Night, everybody.
Good night. And
Good night.
Thank you, Donna.
Night.
And thank you, Leslie and Dan and Eric. I've lost the agenda, so let me try to find it. Help. Oh, it's this. Okay. The next thing on the agenda is a very short item, which is that I filed a ethics disclosure with the select board because my husband and I have a project that we're in planning to upgrade our septic system, which means that we will need to submit an RDA to the Conservation Commission. So that's a conflict of interest for me to have any authority or role in my own project. And that's why I had a consult with Ethics Commission and I filed the appropriate disclosure forms. In those disclosure forms, I made it clear that I would be using possibly consultants who also consult to the Conservation Commission on behalf of applicants. And I'm allowed to use those consultants as long as I make it clear to them that I am not expecting any favoritism and that they do not have to accept work for me. That I need to use people who have advertised, basically. I can't go seeking people out. I have to use people who have sought me out, which means that they have engaged in some sort of advertising. So a kind of complicated process, but anyway. So I was not allowed to even ask the commission to appoint an acting chair on my behalf without permission from the select board, if you can get that. So I went to the select board and asked for permission to ask you. I got permission from the select board. So now I am asking the commission to appoint an acting chair only for my RDA when the time comes for me to submit this request for determination of applicability. And then during that whole proceeding, I will only be functioning as an applicant and not a commissioner. Discuss.
So what do you need? What do you need from us? A motion to approve that?
I need a volunteer to do that. And then I don't think I can vote. So, and we don't have a quorum tonight. So, okay. So we will table that to the next meeting when we do have a quorum, because we need people to vote and I can't vote on this.
I think since Scott's not here, we should appoint him.
Sounds like Beth is willing to do it.
I am willing to do it, but I guess we can't vote on it tonight.
Okay, we can't vote on it tonight and we will put that on the agenda, but now I have permission to ask and then we'll figure it out next time. Okay.
Okay. Sounds good.
So the last thing, the best part of the night is to talk about this idea we had of doing some wetlands resource mapping around town roads. And we have the site visit scheduled for next Wednesday at 3:30. We rescheduled it because of the snow. So I think we hopefully won't have snow. I did get a document from Becky that she got from Tim that has a list of some culverts, and I'll pass it along to you. It's in a PDF. Are we still I'm hoping we're going to still want to do this. I was thinking a little bit about how to plan this project. And it seems to me that there's sort of three pieces to this. We have to figure out where we want to do this surveying. We've got to decide who can do it. And we've got to see who's got the technology. I have a GPS and I also have Field Maps, which is the ArcGIS phone app. And I have an ArcGIS account. Does anybody else have an do you have an ArcGIS account, Beth?
I do. I have at work, I have it. I use the one at work, which, I think I could use that a little bit, but I have Field Maps on my phone too.
And
So
you could use Mass Mapper in the field with a static map. You can make a map ahead of time. And the site visit you want to do with DPW, where 439 on Montague Road.
Yeah.
I think that would be a good place for a dry run. I've done this in the past with us. We've gone on site visits and I brought along my laptop and then pulled up the map that I pre-made ahead of time. But Beth can do this as easily as Mary can do this using Mass Mapper or something
Well, I
like
think
that.
we want to use one platform, Don, for the
Yeah,
map. So,
yeah,
so we
okay.
have 2 GIS accounts. I have a GIS account, which we can use for this. If you don't want to use your town account.
And do you have the ability to use your GPS unit with this account? Are you able to locate, transfer your points?
Yes, I think so.
You can.
I think so, but I have field maps on my phone, which is the ArcGIS app, as does Beth. So I'm thinking that what we might want to do is plan it 2 teams. It'd be good to have more than just 2 people, so we can have a conversation as we're going along about what are the resource areas. And I'd like to make sure that we have like expertise in both teams, not just me. I mean, I was thinking, Beth, you and Don have expertise. I'm hoping Janice will help. Can we prevail on you, Janice?
Maybe.
We'll bring you brownies, whatever you need. Hot chocolate, you name it.
How much time do you think it'll take?
Oh, I don't know.
Talking weeks and weeks or what,
Yeah, but I don't know if we want to do it all in one day. So maybe it's going to be a multi-stage process, and maybe, we could tackle a couple of roads and then see how long it's taking us.
Yeah.
And so, do you want to think about a prospective potential dates on a weekend?
Sure. Do we
Let's
want
just-
to do it, into the beginning of April, just to make sure that the winter weather is gone?
But March is such a fun time to look at wetlands and stormwater. If you could get down Montague Road, but I don't know if we'll be able to get down Montague Road. It might be closed. So it's March. That's when Montague Road closes. So
that's true.
It's horrible right now. Let's just say that.
I know, I saw that. I don't know about this site visit next week. I might have to take my SUV. Because I almost bust a tire down Montague Road last week. So I was thinking, we take a Saturday morning and, kind of maybe get up bright and early and just try to do a chunk of time and then see where we're at, see how long it's taking us. Maybe we could split up between 2 roads with 2 groups. And, I think in terms of priorities, well, first let's think about dates. So how about the last weekend in March? How about like the 26th or the 27th, the 26th?
I have to go get my calendar. Hold on a sec. Okay.
Yeah, that day actually, when I look at my calendar, that works better than the first 2 weekends in April are busy. But the 26th is open.
Okay. All right, let's tentatively think about that. And I was remembering the list we talked about last time. Obviously, Montague Road is a hot ticket item. I know Wendell Road, the dirt road on Wendell, is a hot ticket item. I would say Cooleyville Road is, when I think about wetland resource areas, if we're just focusing on dirt roads, I would say Cooleyville Road. There is a small section of Pratt Corner Road that is very tricky down at the bottom where it's sloping and there's wetlands, but it's not as extensive as Cooleyville and Wendell. You guys agree?
Yeah.
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 Okay. All right, we got 3 areas, 2 teams, 1 day. Somebody's gonna have to bring cookies or donuts. All right.
Sounds good.
I'll coordinate with you guys.
So it's going to be March
Did we pick a
26th,
time to start?
March 26th, 9 a.m.
and we'll figure out where.
We'll figure out where, and I'll confirm with people who's gonna go. And Carrie, if you if you really want to come up here on a Saturday morning on your free time and with us, you're welcome to come. We're all inclusive, and you don't have to.
Saturday, or what Saturday was it?
Saturday the 20th. We just can't pay you for it, unfortunately.
Well, that's
So-
fine. I honestly really like, that's something I've always wanted to do, is build my GIS skills. So like this seems like a really good opportunity to kind of like jump in with you.
Yeah, learn
So
about
I would definitely be down.
Okay, well, that'd be great.
Great.
You said that you're looking at the 27th, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Another person.
26th.
Yeah, the 26th. The other person I was thinking of asking to see if she'd be willing to volunteer with us. I don't know if she would or not. I was just wondering about Erin J.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I can ask her.
She's a
Definitely, I
town
can
resident.
ask her. She's got two little kids, but maybe she'll bring her, she has a baby and a
Aw.
4-year-old. So
Aw.
maybe she could break away and bring the 4-year-old or something.
Yeah, or she can bring kids. I'll take care of them.
As you're juggling your GPS or
I'll
whatever.
let somebody else juggle it. G. You want to ask her. So just for people who don't know, Erin Jakes is the Concom and Amherst wetland
Administrator.
staff person, what Beth used to do for the Concom and Amherst. So she's a wetland scientist and she lives in Shutesbury, so be a nice thing.
On Montague Road.
Montague Road, so she wouldn't have to drive very far. Okay, so yeah, ask her if she's willing to do it. Okay, all right, so our next meeting is the 24th of March. We have the RDA for 585. Oh, one more thing we have to talk about is site visits. We have to do some site visits. I've got them piling up, and I wanted to do 3 or 4 site visits before our March 24th meeting. So I'm wanting to know if we, on March 20th, which is a Sunday, if I can schedule some site visits, 2 or 3 site visits.
Let's see.
Probably at like noon.
Okay, with me.
Yeah, I could do some.
Okay, some. Okay. It's we've had a nice reprieve from site visits, but things are gonna change. Things will change. Okay.
Lay
all
down
right.
the law.
Okay, I will email you guys about those site visits and thank you, everybody. And it's 10:08 and I'm going to call the meeting. Do we have a motion to close?
Motion to close the meeting.
All right, a second. Hi, Miriam seconds. David,
Aye.
Stefan, I, Wilson.
Aye.
Okay, good night, everybody. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Thank you. Good meeting.
Good job.
Thanks.